So anyway, Steven, let's talk through your pain here.
Okay, let's do it.
TCU played a nearly immaculate first half last week. I mean, they were really kind of taking it to UCF. I remember turning off that game at halftime and going, yeah, it's a bummer. I was really hoping it would be better. You know, I don't have a dog in the hunt.
Right. You just wanted a good football game.
I just wanted a good football game. I was excited. I thought the teams were evenly matched. It turns out I was right. It's both teams had one excellent half in them.
Yeah.
And TCU would have rather it been flipped. You know, UCF had the great second half. They came back and won. And what do you think happened outside of the defensive struggles that they had? What happened on offense, and what did UCF do better that got taken away? Because in the first half, Josh Hoover was absolutely dealing.
He was. And, I mean, even in the first half, they were in 3rd and long a lot, and they were just converting it in the passing game, and they kind of did whatever they wanted in the passing game. But when they went up 28-7, Hoover hit Jack Besh on a long touchdown pass. I remember, because, you know, I do a post-game show after, so I'm kind of always watching the game and thinking, like, all right, what's the story? Like, what's the big picture takeaway? And my thought was, I thought they were going to win, and my thought was, all right, I'm going to talk about how they won, but this is still a pretty flawed team because they can't run the ball, and so that's going to show up at some point. Well, it showed up over the next 28 minutes as they couldn't shorten the clock and, you know, ice away that game because they weren't running the ball. And, I mean, you know this, Paul, like, there's just, when you're throwing that much, there's just not much room for error. Like, if you get, they had a 2nd and 5 where they had a nice little screen pass set up, and the receiver, JoJo Earl, just fell. I mean, he just fell on the turf. And then they couldn't convert on a 3rd and 5. They had a couple drives stall in the red zone. They had a false start on 3rd and goal from the 1. So that took 4 points off the board potentially if they could have punched it in there. And then UCF, I think UCF's good. They're big up front. They run the ball really well. KJ Jefferson, when he was asked to throw the ball, did a nice job. But, yeah, it was a tough one. I feel like if that would have just been a tightly contested game all the way through and they lost by a point and it was back and forth, I would have come away saying, all right, well, you know, both teams look like they're decent and TCU can bounce back. But blowing a 21-point lead at home, that's tough. I mean, it's just a bad look. And we'll see what happens against SMU this week. But I think it's a huge game for them just psychologically kind of getting up off the mat. But, yeah, that was one where they let it slip through their fingers, and they're not a super well-balanced team. So it really does feel like most weeks it's going to come down to Josh Hoover's arm and can they get enough stops to win the ball game, which is not a recipe for winning consistently, I don't think.
No, absolutely not. So they look, but my opinion of them actually raised in that game a little bit more. I like, it was a test. They lost by a point. It's not like, it's not the end of the world. I do think that both teams are going to have to be reckoned with down the line, especially if Josh Hoover keeps playing like he is. Like Sonny Dykes was bullish on him, and I remember thinking, like, well, he looked okay to me at times, but, you know, he was also kind of thrust into action. They had a situation with Chandler Morris last year where Chandler Morris came in under the previous staff.
Yeah.
And I think he was maybe more of a Patterson guy than a Dykes guy. And I'm not indicting Chandler Morris on that, but, like, clearly he didn't fit with them the way. Right. And, look, he was supposed to be the starter initially, and then Max Duggan just had his year, you know, finally came into his own. It's where Max Duggan was, you know, obviously recruited by the Patterson regime, but, you know, what ultimately led him to finding his game was Sonny Dykes.
I mean, they took a gamble this offseason by not going to get a QB. I mean, the guy that won on Saturday, KJ Jefferson, there was sort of there wasn't really smoke there, but when he hit the portal, there were a lot of people that were understandably like, well, he played with Kendall Briles at Arkansas. That would make sense. But they stuck with Hoover, and I think that's worked out. I feel like the mistake they made, and Sonny actually talked about this on your show, Paul, but you guys asked him about the running backs, and he was like, well, I think Cam Cook's really good. We like what we have with Trey Sanders, and they didn't make a move there. And I think they also have offensive line issues. But I think Cam Cook's going to be good eventually. Right now, he's struggling. And I feel like part of it's play calling. Also, Sonny said this week, he was like, look, they're running a lot of RPO stuff. And there's times where Josh is just, as good as he's been, like he's just not seen. There's times where he should hand the ball off and he's just not doing it.
Yeah.
Like he just needs to take the 6 or 7 yards that they can get on the ground and stop pulling it out of the running back's chest and throwing it around. But they're going to have to find some balance on offense somehow. I think defensively, they looked like a team that was in year one of a scheme against a good offensive coach. And even like in the first half, UCF moved the ball. TCU blocked 2 field goals. And they were able to get those drives stalled out in the red zone, which was helpful. But in the second half, they started running downhill, and they just had no answer for it.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple other rapid-fire things before we get, like, in the next segment, we'll go through some of the games. Mm-hmm. I got to tell you, FSU plays Cal this week. They're 0, obviously 0-3 versus 3-0.
Yep.
The Calgorithm is a thing I didn't know anything about.
I didn't either.
I didn't know anything about it, but I'm impressed.
They're funny.
They're funny. They're really good. They're in it. They've got zings. FSU has not been as good. FSU Twitter is very angry.
That makes sense. Yeah.
It's very angry. FSU Twitter is famous for being so angry, which is why it's a total buzzkill. But the Calgorithm, Gary, you've seen some of this stuff.
I have. Very entertaining.
It is entertaining.
They've really leaned into the idea of being like the
hippies,
the hippie liberal school.
Yeah.
So they're gonna they've done some photoshops
like woke Campbell Stadium.
Yes, woke Campbell Stadium.
Yeah.
They've done some photoshops for the Cal Bears, bringing in briefcases with CRT like labels on them. So it's really funny. And I mean, Cal's one of those schools that good for them. I didn't have a lot of expectation or thought about them when they moved to the ACC, but they're playing well. And even though FSU's struggling, like this would still be a big statement for them to go in there and get a victory if they can. But yeah, it's fun to see that they have a fan base that is just kind of leaning into the joke. I always like it when people are that self-aware. So it's been funny to watch them go back and forth with FSU fans this week.
Oh yeah, it's been good. And again, we're in an angry phase of our relationship with planet Earth right now.
Just general existence.
Just general existence. Like everything is bad. Like everything's bad. Well, nobody appreciates us. We suck at football all of a sudden again. And we think we deserve more than we're getting. And we think the ACC is taking advantage of us. That's the narrative at Florida State. I don't agree with most of it. I'm very good. And like, I'll tell you, covering the Cowboys as a fan made me able to apply this logic to all the rest of my teams. Is now that I know how the sausage is made, it allows me to separate my emotions from my opinion.
Okay.
On a great many things. And I don't bat 1,000, but I get pretty close. Like, I'd win the title.
I do good on most things now. TCU, I can still get a little cloudy, but for the most part,
FSU is the one where I get cloudy.
I'm able to take a step back and say, okay, this is what's happening.
Yeah, because I look at like a lot of things Florida State's doing, and I agree that Florida State and Clemson need to find a way to make more money to stay competitive and be what they want to do.
Right.
I don't know if this is a fully fleshed out plan, or if it's let's see what happens, and then we'll go to the next step, and we'll do, what do we do now? Because I do think, Steve, I used this analogy yesterday. Have you ever seen the movie The Graduate? Mm-hmm. It's a fantastic movie. It's one of my favorites. The other movie, The Graduate, Dustin Hoffman busts in, and it's like, and then breaks up the wedding, and they run off, and everybody's going, like that, and they're playing Mrs. Robinson, and then they get into like, hello darkness, my old friend, as they're sitting on the bus, and they're like, okay, we're together, great. Now what do we do? Like, what's the plan?
What's the next step?
Yeah. So, like that's the whole thing. So that feels to me like what they're doing right now is FSU and Clemson are, running to the church and banging on the walls and then like they get on the bus and they're like, all right,
what do we do now? Yeah.
Like, unless the phone ring, like as soon as they get out of the conference, what if the phone doesn't ring? Or what if the call comes from somewhere where you didn't want it to come from?
That's true.
That's
Grass is not always greener. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've always thought that, like, while I would like better scheduling matchups, certainly I would love. Hob Hal just texted me. Money isn't fixing FSU's problems, Paul. Not right now.
No, not right now.
Not right now.
But we're talking long term.
We're talking long term, and it probably But also, money may not fix that either.
Sure.
Like if you have,
you still got to play.
If you have poor leadership, like it's not. I mean, I'm not talking about on the field. I think coaching's fine. I think that'll get worked out. But as far as like the decision makers, that's where I'm worried about. Like that's the people who make these decisions, and the coaches just have to go, all right, I guess we're in this conference now. I guess we're doing this now. That's what I'm talking about. There is so much like of that. I just think that working something out with the ACC is going to be better. It's going to be better. Go get your private equity. It's coming everywhere. It's coming everywhere.
Yeah. It's going to be part of our world.
Everywhere that's not like, and even Ohio State might even get into it, but everywhere that's not an Ohio State or a Georgia, a Bama,
they're going to need some subsidy.
I'm all verklempt. I'm totally verklempt about this. When we come back, let's go through the games of the week in the Big 12 and some of the other national games. I want to get your thoughts. Tennessee and Oklahoma, we'll talk about that one too. We'll go through that. And then what's our wheel topic today?
I'm going to have Paul rank villains in college football.
Okay.